Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. Guys, listen, I'm your host, Melvin Casey Lars, and we have with us this evening Dr. Asha Pillai and PhD student Ms. Duneia, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, McManus. But if I'm not, she will correct me. Now, guys, you know how we roll on this show. We just kind of do our thing. We allow the show to flow. We allow our guests to share with us in their wisdom from their professional perspectives. You guys know you're more than welcome to ask questions. We simply ask that you put them in the chat box. Those of you that are watching on Facebook, we may be a little delayed in getting to that question as we're having bad weather here. So our internet may kick out. So if it does, stay with us because we will certainly be back. But this evening, start with our wonderful student, and we're so, again, happy to have her with us. And guys, let me tell you a little bit about this young lady here. Duneia McManus has taken a tailored approach to her pursuit of biomedical research. And all of us are familiar with the STEM program, but we're going to talk about both kinds of STEMs tonight. We want to educate our young people, and we want to break you in with that as we continue to talk about Ms. McManus. Excuse me. The STEM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Of course, I know that you know we don't want to insult your intelligence, but you may not know. Introduction to teaching and her commitment to advancing diversity and equity efforts within the STEM field. Her educational background, professional experiences, and identity have molded her to be inquisitive in nature and sharpen her focus on conducting biomedical research and championing transformative repairs to the STEM research field diversity pipeline. Now, for the entirety of her graduate academic careers, she has cultivated her identity as a research scientist via participation in various biomedical research opportunities and multiple leadership roles, including during her time as a PhD candidate at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, Microbiology and Immunology Department. At the onset of her graduate school career, she planned to pursue scientific research opportunities that require substantive hands-on bench work and dynamic scientific writing. In this pursuit, it reignited her passion for advancing diversity and equity in our field with a focus on ensuring Black and Brown youth garner an interest in STEM and are provided, STEAM, I should be saying, provided with the appropriate support, encouragement, and resources to sustain their STEAM interest and passion at every level of education. She seeks opportunities to exist at the intersection of her passion and purpose, leveraging her current skill set and background experience. Now, we're going to share with you more because you need to know about this magnificent young lady. Now, Ms. McManus was born in Prince George's County, Maryland, where she obtained her bachelor's degree in biological science from the University of Maryland, College Park. To gain more research experience after spending 2 years working in the clinic, she attended Virginia Polytechnic and State University under the NIH funded post-baccalaureate research and education program, where she researched poultry immunology. Her research was heavily focused on assessing the expression levels of immunity-related genes via qPCR in turkey, Cecil tonsils, investigated under studied poultry disorder, irritable Krabbe syndrome. Interesting title. As a result of her experiences, biomedical research focusing on the study of women's health, immune deficiencies, and health disparities have garnered her attention as research interests, I should say. More specifically, she is interested in translational research with clinical application in immunology, disease prevention, and disease causation, possible therapeutics, and diagnostic tools. Wait, guys, a little bit more you need to know. These interests have led her to join Dr. Asha B. Pillai's lab at the University of Miami, where she is now a PhD candidate. Yay! The lab specializes in research in immunology, especially in the effort to understand the dynamic interaction of immune systems responses as it relates to immune regulation, immune tolerance, and immunotherapy. Within this lab, she is able to research the intersectionalities of the immune system, possible complications occurring during allotransplant, such as graft versus host disease, as well as test possible therapeutics for these complications. With this, she is able to elucidate further immune tolerance therapeutics for complications due to the possible knowledge we obtain from asking a simple question, and in turn, use that knowledge at a broader scale. As an African American woman, a member of a population disproportionately affected by histocompatibility barriers that lead to the inability to find a matched bone marrow donor in case of transplant. She has particular interest in researching transplant tolerance as an opportunity to not only push science and health research forward, but give back to our community. So, guys, you have here Ms. Duneia McManus. And Ms. McManus, I'm going to ask you to, as Dr. Asha Pillai has joined us, Dr. Pillai, we were just introducing Ms. McManus, and we were sharing her bio. And I'm sharing with her, I don't want to butcher her name. So as when we come back to you, Ms. McManus, will you please make sure that we're pronouncing your name correctly? But ladies and gentlemen, allow us at this point to welcome Dr. Asha Pillai. Many of you guys saw Dr. Pillai several months ago when she was here, and I received all kind of questions, and you guys were giving her thumbs up and talking about how excited you were and how happy you were to hear Dr. Pillai, Dr. Pillai share with us. So Dr. Pillai, please allow me to reintroduce you to our audience, and please allow me to share some of your bio information here. And we want to, again, welcome Dr. Pillai to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. And you guys know I'm just a crazy guy. We just kind of rock and roll, and we deal with our beautiful ladies that are here. So listen.
As well. So there you go. By the way, you were right up front. My last name is Pillai, and I'm completely shocked by your background. We need to change that. That's just a little too much there, my friend.
Well, listen, thank you very much, Dr. Pillai. Thank you for correcting me. So guys, listen, you know how I rock and roll on this, the Nobody Asked Me Guy show, but I'm going to give you guys some more insight on Dr. Pillai. Now, as Deputy Director for Translational Research and Training, Dr. Pillai assists faculty in trainee development in the Department of Pediatrics. She also serves as Director of UM's Federation of Clinical Immunology Societies, Center of Excellence in Human Immunology, one of 70 centers selected by, I'll call it FOCUS, for innovation in immunology and translational impact to human health and well-being. She is Associate Professor of Pediatrics, Microbiology and Immunology and Medicine at the Miller School of Medicine. Now, Dr. Pillai has a long-standing commitment to biomedical research, innovation, pragmatic development, and international health. Her research in innate immune tolerance and immunotherapy achieved national prominence for its relevance to mismatched donor. I think this is hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, allowing early cures for globally prevalent blood disorders, including sickle cell disease and thalassemia. And she'll help me pronounce this as we go. Her research has been nationally recognized through a 2007 Ruth Kirstein's Award, KO8 Career Development Award from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, R56 and R01 awards, and the V Foundation for Cancer Research Scholar Award, among others. She was recently appointed to NIH's Transplantation, Tumor Immunology, and Tolerance Studies section. She has also been recognized for her leadership in teaching and mentoring, including awards for Outstanding Teaching Residence at Baylor College of Medicine and Outstanding Teaching Fellow at Stanford. And you know what we do. We say to people all the time, audience, if they are kind enough to send us a bio, then we're going to read it. So sit tight, here we go. We're almost done. Dr. Pillai runs a research and clinical program at HSCT, immunotherapy and transplant immunology, and her research group is a member of the tumor immunology and immunotherapy program at UM's NCI designated Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. She has mentored or is mentoring 4 PhD graduate students, 20 plus doctoral fellows, 50 plus clinical trainees, several of whom are now in faculty appointments in academia and industry. And tonight, she was kind enough to allow us to share with one of her doctoral students in the person of Ms. McManus. Now, Dr. Pillai is a fellow of the American College of Physicians and a diplomat and fellow of the American Board of Pediatrics and American Board of Internal Medicine. She serves on several international committees, including, again, I'm going to call it FOCUS, Educational Committee, through which she is currently developing and deploys global coursework in immunology in Asia and Africa. The ASTCT Committee for Cellular Therapy, the Pediatric Blood and Marrow Transplant Consortium, and the Scientific Advisory Board for Science Immunology. Guys, I told you we had a great lineup. I mean, what better guest could we have tonight other than Dr. Asha Pillai and Ms. Duneia McManus? Ladies, good evening.
Good evening.
And you had my name right the last time, right before you said Dr. Pillai's, it's Duneia.
Duneia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not Duneia, I'm sorry. Duneia, thank you so much for correcting me. Dr. Pillai, we're going to jump right into this conversation. Now, we know.
Would you allow me to do one thing for a moment, Melvin?
Please.
Let me just introduce Duneia, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
So I'm not going to get into the history of Duneia's name. She can tell you about that. That alone is an interesting thing. But I do have to say a few words about Duneia. So Duneia is an outstanding mentee of mine, but I'm proud to call her my mentee. I'm honored to call her my mentee, but she deserves her own credit. So let me get into that a bit. So, you know, she's a native of Maryland area, and she'll tell you more about her background there. I can tell you that I had the privilege of starting to mentor her. Roughly, is it 2.5 years now? Just over 2 years, which we have to include one COVID year in there. There are so many things I can say about her and how incredibly intelligent she is, mature, organized, and capable of biomedical research. But I think beyond that, as a future colleague, a teacher in the field, someone I expect is going to be a tremendous role model for so many people, not Black students and people of color alone, just as a human being. I'm really honored to have her in the group. And we intend to make sure that she gets all the best resources she can that I can muster to keep up with her brain power, and make sure that she, you know, impacts the field with the immunology research that she's doing. The studies that she's doing are going to be very seminal to understanding how we can optimize transplant outcomes and how we can optimize some parts of what we call immunotherapy, which is using immune cells that we create or manipulate outside of the body back into the body for immunotherapy of cancer and transplant problems. I think on a larger level, she's a humanitarian. She's also someone who does tremendous work for equity, but that's, you know, again, a component, one facet of her professional activities, which she manages all of these with incredible finesse. So I never have to worry that if I put something in Duneia's hands, which I throw a lot of saucers and they can attest to that she'll be able to keep up with it and do beyond what I would have expected anyway. So that's an important quality about her. The other thing is that, you know, she's a role model in the lab for many of our scientists in terms of how she proactively manages her projects, coordinates others, and really thinks forward about her science. So you're going to be hearing the name Dr. Duneia McManus after she gets her doctorate. So keep track of that name. Anyway, that's my little spiel.
Hey, listen, that was a great spiel, because I was saying to Duneia earlier before you came on, as I was in my normal rambling, I was saying to her that you know, a lot of times people never forget, or they make a point of trying to highlight anything negative that they might know about someone. But when it comes to the positivity, it's very quiet. So I appreciate and applaud the fact that as her mentor, that you have shared such a glowing identification, if I can call it that, of Miss Duneia. So that's wonderful, because we know how things happen. So listen, I'm happy that you're here, Duneia. I'm happy that you are here. And as I was saying earlier in my babbling again to Duneia, I kept saying STEM instead of STEAM. And I know that we're going to talk about STEM as it relates to the research that you do. And we're going to be, and Duneia also will hopefully share with us about STEAM. I have quite a few young listeners, which I'm always tickled about that. I guess it's just the old teacher in me. And, you know, we want to give them a lot of insight as well. So, Dr. Pillai.
Sure.
You and I have had several conversations about the work that you do as far as it relates to research, and we talked a little bit about sickle cell anemia and that kind of thing. So if you would first share with our audience, exactly what is STEM and how does it relate to the research that you do?
So what is STEM and how does it relate to our research?
Yes.
Science, technology, engineering, and medicine. And we can get into the A as well. I'll let Duneia go there. But these are areas of incredible impact for research, mainly because they're areas of primary discovery, we call them, where new findings made in the frontiers of work done in these areas that are sort of what we call fundamental research, meaning we're asking basic questions. Why is the sky blue? Why does a baby implant into a mother? We've used this example. Let me just go back to that. So, how is it that a baby is able to be tolerated immunologically by a mother for 10 months and vice versa? And then what results in that being repeated among many different children in the same mother? That question is actually the basis for the immunology that we discovered that then is now translated into creating new transplant successes for non-patients who are, elderly or young children from their parents or older adults from their children. So you can imagine that these two areas wouldn't naturally intersect. They do, but the truths are hidden. The root system between those are hidden truths underground. So our job in these fields is to dig into the ground, to ask a question here because something is perturbing or interesting or fascinating to us, and then realize that this could then connect to something else. And then we grow another tree there that helps a completely different field. So that's really the fundamental nature of STEM. And this is actually why, and I'm going to I don't know, Duneia has a lot to say on this, that this is why the things that we traditionally call inclusivity or diversity, et cetera, which is not really what it is, it's about equity. Why having that in the field of education in these areas is so important, because the way that someone who approaches that same problem from a completely different personal perspective, how that digging happens in that space could result in a completely different set of discoveries. So it's a more fundamental type of academic pursuit where you have incredible ability to impact a completely different area, right? So until we made that discovery, it wasn't even possible. Literally until I was finishing my training. In fact, even after I finished my training, people still believe we couldn't do transplants from people who weren't matched to each other. And now no one would think about it. We don't have to worry about that at the same. We still are optimizing it. There are complications, but that came out of that basic research. And in the same way, the life perspectives with which we come to that research often also influences how we think about it. Actually, the reason I looked into that was because I was interested in possibly finding cures for these conditions, which I saw growing up as a young Indian American woman, because thalassemia, one of the conditions you said, is very endemic in India. In fact, sickle cell disease is also endemic because actually the natives of India are Black. They don't come from the Aryan nation. They actually come from Africa, and our genes are actually very much in common. And so I had an interest in all that. So I brought my personal perspectives into that work also. And I can tell you that people who don't come from those backgrounds may not be thinking that way at all. So just to kind of give you, I hope that answered some part of the question, which is that these are important areas of fundamental research, but how we bring people into it, how they're educated, how much freedom they have to have time that's protected to do research is all going to play a role in the types of discoveries that can come back. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we want to also emphasize giving trainees who have those capacities equal opportunity to be free to play in the minefield, so to speak.
Wow, very interesting.
Example, so the connection between that pregnancy and then bone marrow transplant, right? So the next connection is the organ transplant people started paying attention to our work in stem cell transplantation. And so kidney, liver, heart transplant surgeons started getting interested in whether those immune systems mechanisms can work there. So then it starts influencing solid organ transplant and so on and so forth. So the point about STEM is that the root systems, it's very funny because the word stem and the roots, but the stem is connected to these roots, and these roots are actually going around, there's this recent discovery that trees talk to each other through their root systems all across great distances. So I think that's a theme that's probably very important in STEM. That is that there's this underground system of truth that we can discover by going after one system here. So I stop there.
But hey, you don't have to stop, because that's why we're here, and we have to educate our audience. We have to educate our people, and the whole thing is about humanitarianism and knowledge and understanding resources and the whole nine. So you're right on point. Duneia, would you like to?
Yeah, so for me, I think, like Dr. Pillai said, I'm definitely going to add the A in there, the art, because that's something that's really important to me and something that really helped me flow and get into the STEM program. I don't think Dr. Pillai knows this, but I got into University of Maryland and into Hofstra University. And Hofstra University is the university where Francis Ford Coppola went, the director of The Godfather, right? So the only thing that kept me from being a movie director or in film, because that's something I was interested in doing, and going to University of Maryland and becoming a biology major, is a simple, well, I'll have more friends in Maryland because I'm from Maryland, so I'll stay here, versus going to New York and doing that. And because of my love of the arts and the creativity that comes with that, that can naturally just be transferred into STEM as well. And just you being naturally inquisitive and wanting to learn more about something and being passionate about something, the passion that like an artist has is also the same passion that a STEM major has. It's just directed into a different place. And I think they're both just equally as important to make sure that the people who want to do those things, whether it be science, technology, or whether it be the arts, that they have the resources to have it. So the resources to go after whatever they want to go after. And I think the main basis of STEAM for me is creativity and diversity. There's so many modes of art. There's so many modes of STEM. There's so many modes. And art only gets better as like more influences come about. And that's how STEM is as well. So STEM will only get better as we have more people from diverse backgrounds that bring their perspectives to the bench or wherever it may be that they're doing, research or science. And that's the same way it is with art. Art only progresses once we have a diverse background and people bring their different cultures to it and critique it in that way. So I see them as juxtaposed with one another.
Yeah, I fully agree with Duneia. The other thing Duneia may not know, because I haven't told you this, but I studied classical South Indian dance for a lot of my youth, and I actually used to teach it in a school. And I went and lived in India for a year and did that before I came back to medical school. And like I said, I could have just gone down that path as well as philosophy. Those are areas that interest me. And I'm pretty sure that I can also speak for both of us when I say that, I often get up from one of those things and this flash of idea comes to me that relates to the science, and vice versa. It's not uncommon that a composition comes to me while I'm in the middle of an experiment. It's because the mind is a remarkable thing, and we don't even understand its potential. So a lot of humility is a good thing there. But it's fascinating to me. I don't even try now to figure out what gave me that idea versus this, or what solved that problem. I just put it there. If I'm blocking against a problem, I'll just put it down and go and exercise my other side of my brain for my own. And it's remarkable. It always solves the problem. I've never had a situation where it didn't solve it. So like perseverating against that problem with only that side of my brain is never the solution. So I fully appreciate what Duneia is saying. And if you see how she functions in the lab, she's living proof that that's true. Because she solves those scientific problems, and all that matters is that she solves them, not how. And in fact, I would say that how she solves them does matter. It's important that it's through that creative route. That's how new ideas are brought in.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that we're talking about this topic and about STEAM and that kind of, and when Duneia talk about the arts, and allow me to say to you, both of you, as we continue with your statements, is that was always my thing as an athlete. I didn't allow people to identify me as an athlete. As a matter of fact, I think I mentioned to Dr. Pillai that I always had an issue with people calling young men and women student athletes, and history will bear that out, but that's not our conversation tonight. That was not a flattering term. It was a term, all it had to do with who the university didn't want to pay insurance for a young man that got injured. So the lawyer said, well, since he's not an employee, he's a student. That's how that, but anyway, that's neither here nor there for tonight. But as we talk about the process, and I know both of you are, from what you've explained very eloquently, both of you are very much into research, and we're talking about the effects, even though we haven't used the word effect, but we are indeed talking about the effects that research by minority, if we would allow ourselves to be identified as that's another one of my pet peeves, but by minority individuals that are in the field of research and working with those of us that are deemed minorities, and the importance of it. Will you touch on that a little bit as to how it makes a difference in treating ailments or finding solutions to ailments, et cetera? I know you touched upon it earlier, but can we dive a little deeper into that?
Sure. Let me let Duneia start. I'd like you to give your, and again, she's in a PhD program, but she's doing work that's highly impactful to clinical medicine.
So this is something that I think about, and really I think is what's driving me, especially now during COVID, and that nuanced, it's not even really nuanced, but even that this scope of people that look like me are not getting the vaccine. And it's because of valid trust issues from the science and medical fields, right? So I think one way to, solve those type of issues are to have people that look like me actually doing the research and actually putting forth the data and actually communicating it in a way that is palatable for common person to understand it. I think a lot of times, at least culturally, I understand that I got to give this message quickly. I got to give it in plain terms, and I have to be relatable to the person that I'm giving this information to. And sometimes, because of what the science community looks like, doesn't look like us, they miss the mark on that. And that is a main point of how, we can get more people interested in more preventative measures and getting them to the doctor more and more screenings and more, having them understand that the research can only make things better. You're not necessarily a test subject like a
guinea pig,
a mouse, a guinea pig or anything like that. But we can't push things forward if we don't have information coming from our particular population. And it's really important, especially with our population with diseases that affect us primarily or at an astounding rate other than other populations. So I think my biggest thing is science communication and science communication tailored to specific populations. And that's all I want to be, is like, I want to challenge what a scientist looks like to the average person. And I think that is just, like you said, you hate it being called a student athlete because that kind of puts you in a box, right? Of this, he's a jock. He's just worried about lifting after class. He's not really worried about this class. He's not studying to actually understand the material. He's just studying to get so that he can pass to, play the game on Saturday. No. For me, I've never wanted to like fit in any type of box. Yes, I'm a nerd, but also I can be poppin' and I can be, you know, fashion forward and I can be artsy and I can be all of these things and
You're a
still
multifaceted person, right?
yeah, I can still just be, I can exist and I can make change in however way that may be. And I think that pushing that narrative and making sure that little girls who can be like, you know what, I see myself in her. She's doing this. And then not even with science, she's doing this. She went to college. She went, and not even college, she got her doctorate degree, or she's in graduate school. I can do that too. She came from the same type of background. Look at, like, even the fact that I'm wearing braids is something, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's just so many things that go into it. I think once we get a good foundation of science communication, we can, that is very nuanced for a certain population, and really understand the cultural intricacies of that, we can like push science way more forward than what it already is. Because to be honest, I believe that our community can't advocate for themselves if they aren't even being told what they need to advocate for. They can't say we need to do more research on this when they don't even know, they don't even understand that that is not highly researched because it's not a sexy thing to research at this point. So how would they know? They wouldn't know. No, who's going to tell them? Not the people that don't look like them and don't think it's important to research it. But if I'm saying like, hey guys, I know you know someone who has this disease, or because it's so prevalent, and or has this ailment, and you know the NIH or whoever it might be does not really give us money to study this particular thing the way we want to study it. And not only that, but to get more money, we need y'all to be involved as well. So you have to come, you have to go to the doctor, you have to come in and, you know, be a part of the clinical trial, or do whatever it may to be to do for this to be successful. I think it's a two-way street.
Great. No, I agree with Duneia on that. And I only thing I would add, I mean, there's what she said, but I would say that the only thing I would add is, and I'm just going to name some names. So, you know, Kizzy Corbett, I was just looking up to make sure that I had her institute right. She's in the NIAID, which is the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease. And that is where, you know, Dr. Tony Fauci is based. He's the head of that institute. So you've seen her on the video, you know, and of course there was the public relations, I will just keep it, you know, at that, the public relations aspect of the optics of having a Black woman leading that vaccine effort, which actually, I think in some ways it may have initially backfired because people felt that it might be just performative. But actually, she was working on this long before this pandemic. And that's the beauty of the point, that her longstanding commitment to that, and of course, Tony Fauci's integrity in bringing that forward, was probably, I don't want to speak for others, but central from my Black colleagues, et cetera, that I hear from many different communities that they work in their research. They're getting the feedback that was extremely important for them to feel trust, because they're, you know, obviously beyond Tuskegee, which everyone thinks about, the things that have been done wrongly against Black peoples historically, you know, that being a more recent example, but hundreds of years of that. The other thing that I think really needs a lot of emphasis, and we are emphasizing, is that where Black people haven't been included in research, meaning trials that are done in largely Caucasian male populations don't necessarily have bearing properly on Black women or Black men, or even, you know, any sort of situations that might represent the genetic variations that are important for that disease. And one of the COVID is a great example of that. You know, Of course, as often happens with systemic or institutional racism, where we don't fully acknowledge it, that's coming into play now, and people are getting conscious, or we're being made to acknowledge, which is part of consciousness, that it's more than just structural inequities in economics and where we live and whether we have hygiene, and those were actually forms of racist thought processes as well, to assume that that would be it, because actually there's a whole genetic component to very strong immune systems from African associated gene complexes that are really strong in the innate immune system, for example, that are part of the over response to COVID. And that's coming out now, but you won't find that unless you research the populations that have those incredible genes. They worked for many millennia against many different things, and they can be co-opted by a pathogen, meaning something that causes disease. So we have to think about that when we think about inequities in healthcare, and not have a very narrow perspective, which is based in paternalism, right? And how can we remove the paternalism unless we already have people involved in the work, leading the work, central to the work, driving policy in the work, making decisions about what's funded, who understand this at an intrinsic level. It's not something intellectual for them. And how would you, so the way to do that is that, you grew up with your mother dealing with hypertension. That's the direct result of why I went into my field, was things that I saw growing up, correct? It's true for all of us. There's nothing different for any group of people on that. And so, but the problem was the underrepresentation of those people in leadership. So I consider, it an important life goal in my work to mentor people like Duneia, so that she has the opportunities to do what she would already do if she weren't held back. It's not about giving her opportunities that she needs to succeed. In my view, it's about not holding back opportunities from her that she deserves.
Wow, very powerful. As you brought back memories, there were several young men in elementary school, middle school with me that were smart. Unfortunately for them, they were poor. Missed a lot of school, that kind of thing. But they come to school, and some of us were envious, and I probably was one of them. They might show up on test day and kick our butts. So when you talk about, people that have this innate intelligence and things like that, and I have been blessed to have known a couple of them, quite honestly.
I doubt that you might have been in that group, but anyway, that's fine.
Yeah, well, somewhat. I don't want to, pat myself on the back, but I was somewhat in that group. But it's amazing. But if I can go back briefly before I ask you ladies to share more, when I was diagnosed with leukemia, the only reason I was diagnosed with leukemia was because my very personal best friend, Dr. Larry Daniels, who was an African-American physician, diagnosed me. And I tell people all the time, he was my guardian angel, because I did not trust my less melanated doctors. And I'll be honest, I still don't. And I go on record as saying that. Unfortunately, when I was having some heart issues, I had one of them to say to me when we were talking about the condition and things like that and what we could do. And they were talking about different procedures. Then he finished his statement by saying, well, I don't care what you do. And at that point, I'm saying to myself, see, this is why we have issues a lot of times. So I hear you very loudly, and people seem to try to ignore the fact about exactly what both of you are sharing, is that there are trust issues, there are trust factors, and that kind of thing. And many times there is people that don't really care and will make disparaging remarks to either try to incite you or because they don't really want to treat you in the first place. But anyway, I don't want to be on my soapbox about that. But as we talk about STEAM and STEM, as we move forward with the research and the technology that's being presented, and I noticed on the bio, Dr. Pillai, that all of the people that you're mentoring and the PhD students, and you mentioned some of the individuals that are now employed, et cetera, when you encounter students and they are less than enthusiastic about really helping other people, how do you handle that, if I might ask?
It's a great question. It's an ongoing, we're always learning. That's actually a real pet peeve of mine. And I'm still learning how to navigate my views on that. And I think my lab members will attest to the fact that you don't last a long time in my program if you really don't care. And that's not I don't have a problem saying that. I've come to understand I'm understanding myself more and more, and I've come very comfortable with that. I don't mind what people feel about that anymore, because it's not my job to please you as a trainee. It's my job to make sure that you become the best I feel you can be, and you correct me if I can make it better, right? I should be open to that, but it's not really about because we are privileged to have the opportunity to have this type of education, right? I want Duneia to talk about, backgrounds and things that she's, seen growing up, because we understand the value of the education we've been given and what we're getting to an opportunity to do. And I think it's really important to have that, because when we lose touch with that, we lose touch with something really central to research, which is that it's about improving the human condition. There's very little research that's meaningful that doesn't have something to do with the human condition. You could even talk about astrophysics. Understanding black holes is extremely important to the human condition, actually. And I won't get into that today, but there are a lot of things that tie in between those areas. So I think it's, you can really find very little meaningful research where you don't care about the outcome of the work for humans. More importantly, to do it well, you have to care every day about what you're doing. Now, you're not going to have an ideal day every day. We all navigate lots of challenges. But if you're not passionate about what you're doing, and I know this sounds very cliched, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it becomes tedious work. And the problem with tedious work is that your creativity genes are shut off. You go onto autopilot. Now, there are many things we can do in autopilot. Research isn't one of them. You can do parts of experiments on autopilot. So, we always talk about this in our group. We set up everything so that then we can be on autopilot. We might be listening to music, and hopefully we're thinking of something good for ourselves, because you really don't want to be using your brain energy about while you're what we call pipetting, depositing fluid into little wells. And we don't want to be using our mental energy there. But beyond that, everything else about the experiment it should excite us. And again, we have our off days, but like I said, what I think your question, if I'm correct, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was when someone is fundamentally not engaged. So I will say one other step there. We're all human. So my first step is always to determine if somebody was engaged and is not engaged now, what's going on that we can do, because, humans don't disengage without a good reason. And so we should, whether it's something in their lives that's challenging them or something about us and how we're functioning that needs to improve, I think we need to not have hubris there and be a little bit understanding. And I often uncover things that are just, very educational for me that I wasn't seeing, were issues. And so I learn as much, and I'm not being cliched here, I learn as much from the mentoring as the mentees do at some level. And I'm bringing my perspective to the mentoring, but my mentees are influencing me. It's bidirectional. So I think my perspective on that, though, is still fundamentally that your goal is to have passion for what you do. And so if we're not there, we need to do what's needed to try to get there. So it has to be engaged. Now, if someone fundamentally doesn't want to care, that's a good way to just not be in our program, because I don't believe, I fundamentally don't do something I don't believe in. So I'm not expecting everyone to believe the same that I do, but I can't engage a mentee who's pretending to care. Because why? I understand how many hundreds of thousands of people would love to have that opportunity. So it's very hard for me to engage a person who doesn't realize or care that that's important. And I'll tell you the other part, it's very hard for such people to do something for society, right?
No, I'm sorry. No, please continue.
Yeah, so the other part of it is that if you're not engaged, it's very hard for you to do something meaningful for society with that. When you face challenges, if you really you didn't start in a good space where you didn't have challenges, And, Duneia can already attest, she's been through a lot of things this past year, separate from COVID. I've certainly faced challenges. When you face those challenges, if you don't have a reason to be doing this, the research won't go forward. So that's the other point. Society's investing in us to get to a certain point with this work, right? So when you talk about the National Institutes of Health, if you go back and look at the mission statement, I'm actually going to make we're going to have one session where all of our students actually read what the Department of Health and Human Services, which funds the National Institutes of Health. So there's no research funded by the NIH that isn't from the HHS, which is, notice, Health and Human Services. So it has to be for purposes that are useful there. So I think it's really central that for us to finish what we start, or at least get as far as we can with it. If another group or another project, or even someone else in our group is going to pick up and go next. So the way that research is like if you've ever watched the baton relays in the Olympics, you cannot have somebody in round one just decide, okay, I'm going to stop here and just say, I'm done. That's not how it works. You need to make it to the next person and hand off the baton. That kind of responsibility is required. So that's why I say about maturity is actually really important in research. A sense of accountability.
Absolutely. Listen, and no, that's a great job. I would like to hear from Duneia.
Honestly, I feel as though there are one or two things that can happen, right? That person would weed themselves out if they're really not interested in helping and doing what is necessary for research or whatever it may be. It could be for anything. When they hear what they have to do to complete the
Project, yeah.
The project or whatever it may be, they'll back off from it. And that could be someone who says, you know what, I'm not really interested in teaching. I'm not really caring. I don't really care about the youth, but I just need a job. And, whatever, right? They get into teaching and they're not really driven by it. And then they're struggling, and that's it for them. The job wouldn't want them anymore, essentially, right? Or you think you might be interested in something, you think you have a passion for something, and you don't realize that that's not what that passion really is. And that's something that was for me personally. So I spent 2 years working in the clinic, and because I thought my love for science translated to medicine and directly interacting with patients. And it turned out that wasn't for me. You can shadow all the doctors that you want in the world and shadow them for three hours a day, twice a week. And that's cute and everything because that's 3 hours of your day. But can you imagine doing that thing 8 hours a day, every single day, even when you don't want to think about it on the weekend, and finding that that's not your passion. And that's something that I had to go through. And I'm like, well, what else can I do I still love science and I still want to help people. I might not just want to do it at a personal interaction. And for me, it was more so my personality. I was just drained with so much personal interaction all day, every day, to the point where I would just go home at 5 o'clock and sleep from 5 until the next day, because it just took a lot out of me. And I knew that's something I couldn't sustain for the rest of my life, right? But I still wanted to help those people. I still wanted to use science to do it. And sometimes you have to kind of get through those moments to get to the next thing. So not ever did my boss know that I was not passionate about it or not interested about it. You just do what you need to do. I took that time. I said, okay, well, I have all this clinical experience, not really, but shadowing doctors and things of that nature. And I have no research experience, and I can't get a job in research because I don't have an experience. So it's just like that cycle thing. So I'm like, so how can I get some? What can I do? And really, when you're passionate about something and when you hit those roadblocks and those things happen, the person who is really interested will find the next thing to get them interested, or will ask, like, you know, what else can I do? This isn't really it for me. Didn't know that you, or you probably didn't know that it wasn't it for me because I've been trying so hard, but this isn't it. And how can I get to the next step? And that's just coming from the place of a mentee of you'll be able to tell who's kind of like self-driven to actually to be passionate about something and really wanting to help versus someone who's lackluster and is not really doing anything. So at the same time, I say the person who's kind of lackluster and not even doing anything, I personally can't see how that can happen, because either way, you have to make it to a finish line. You can't leave this place without a recommendation. You can't leave this this job without like some type of something that you can put it on your resume. So make the best out of this time, even if you are not passionate about, you know, doing this for the long term. Use what you can out of it. It's probably bad, but do what you can out of it, but use it to your advantage. All right, this is not something I want to do for the long term, but while I'm here, let me excel at it. Let me try my hardest so that I can get what I can get out of it is something positive. I learned one lesson that I'm not passionate about this, but I also learned perseverance and still excelling at something and using it to my advantage.
Great.
I have a few things to follow up on what Duneia said, though. Actually, that's wonderful. First is, you can hear in what Duneia is saying, the maturity, the dedication, and all those things, because I will say that having mentored now so many people, that is not true for a lot of mentees. They actually don't just necessarily try to decide that if they're not passionate about something, that they will follow it through. 80% of people actually, just by numbers, and I'm just my experience, I've looked at the data, really just drop it. They just decide that that's not an investment of energy they want to make. So Duneia is an exception, which I know I'm biased, but I've seen that. So her view of that may be different, but I will tell you that that's what you want to aspire to, right? If I go to do whatever it is and I'm not good at it, or I don't want to do it, I can still decide to squeeze that lemon, because there's character development to be had. And that is just a tribute to both her personality and her upbringing. I'm having met her parent, you know, her father at least, and I know I've heard so much about her mother that it's about how you're brought up, it's character. But character strengthening comes in those situations. Actually, to follow up on something though, I absolutely see Duneia's point on this, because there is another situation that I should say where sometimes people aren't really passionate, and that's because they don't have confidence yet. They're not sure they're able to. That's actually something I try to. I hope that I continue to grow that in me. I have a lot of compassion for that, because I think you want to give people the best chance to feel confident in themselves, you know, and the system certainly doesn't try to give that to you. So you have to create environments where people are given a little bit of leeway for not being sure. And whenever you're not sure, the natural response of most intelligent people is not to jump headfirst into something they're not sure of. It's to stop and look and be hesitant and not commit. And so so the other group is that there's a really intelligent group of people that just aren't sure of themselves. And there's so much in life that can put you there. It could be your entire background, or it could be coming into a space where you are now, where that's not conducive to your being focused, or being constantly told by someone in your background that you're not really suited, or even just watching other people, you know, who look like you not succeed. That no one may see that except you. So that's the thing where I think it's really important for a mentor to be sensitive to, because we don't know what we don't know. So I think that the first step there is my first step is hopefully always to call the person and we have a conversation where it's not, you know, why don't you feel passionate, but sort of, what do you think is going on, you know? And I learn a lot from that process. So I think, and I think that's actually something I want to emphasize more and more myself, because there's a lot of growth to be had in understanding what goes on in the background of those things. And those are some of the best people sometimes. Once they get on fire, there's no looking back. Plus, they influence so many more people than the person who had everything going for them up front into the space. So I think that's something that we really have to emphasize. We have to be intentional about stopping ourselves to ask that question. You know, so I hope that we do that more and more in science and STEAM as a whole.
But you know, as both of you share what you're sharing, and the last piece that you mentioned about, you know, people with the background, different backgrounds, and if I can not rephrase what you're saying, but just saying this, is that people, there seems to be the attitude across, in this country anyway, is that you just fall into something whether you're prepared or not. And that people that may not have that silver spoon does not even deserve a chance to share what they have been given, and that is from our maker. So, you know, it's always interesting to hear those perspectives, and don't want to keep you ladies all night. My final question that I would like to ask both of you to share with us is, in the medical arena, and we know there's so much talk, which we all alluded to earlier, about systemic racism, etc. Are you finding that the conversation of inclusion is really intended to be followed through on, or do you think it's a lot of fodder in the medical arena?
I'm going to let Duneia start.
I don't want to get anybody in trouble now.
I keep
Yeah, no. So personally, I think it's so funny. During this whole, you know, during COVID, we were all at home, and then the George Floyd incident, murder actually occurred, and I was home actually, and I was just fuming. And my dad, I have a nickname, he has a nickname for me now called Little Malcolm X, because I was just writing letters, sending emails, talking to anybody with any type of power, and letting them know that things need to change. And I can't change the government, but what I can do is start some change here at where this place is where I am, right? And I will say that we're in a unique position at the University of Miami, Miller School of Medicine, because our dean is Black. And so this is about having people who look like you and come from those different backgrounds take those things seriously, right? So when I have a Black dean and I can email him and say, hey, what can we do? We have this list of demands that we would like to have things change. He can actually look at it and say, I know we need to change it, and I'm going to use my power to change it. And that is the importance of having people, diversity at these positions of power, because when someone lives and walks that life that is actually being held back by systemic racism and things of those nature, they're going to work harder to break those barriers. And it sucks because sometimes we just want to exist. I didn't want to add that extra load onto my plate during my graduate career and actually become a freedom fighter. But here I am because it's something that is important to me. And it's, you know, too much is given, much is expected. And I've been given this opportunity to be a graduate student at this time, at this very place. I think it's expected of me to use my voice for those who are going to come after me to make it even better, a better institution. So to answer your question, I can say personally that at the Miller School of Medicine, there is actual movement forward in changing the systemic racism or institutional racism that may be at the institution, because at the very, I think what we all have to come to realize is that these institutions, whether it be the university or different corporations, were not made with people that look like us in mind, at all. Like, it was actually, and if it was with us in mind, it was to keep us out. And that's the foundation of the university, whether they realize it now or not in 2021. Back in the early 1800s, that's what the foundation was. So because it's on those foundations, things that are just going to have to change, and we have to come to terms with it. It's like, it's just something that has to happen. And I can say at the University of Miami that there is real change that is being taken seriously, and being talked about, and forward movement.
And so I'll add to that, that from my perspective, when we have slightly different, life perspectives because of our different experiences. So I come from a background where, my parents left India in the post-colonial era. My father was born into British colonial India. My mother was born just as they were getting independence, so to speak. But so I was a freedom fighter from the time I was very young, and my father, absolutely, we had, even when we didn't have money for everything, as he was a PhD student, he would find $1 and $2 books. So we basically grew up with books, right? And I was a book hound. And the reason I say that is I was actually more fascinated with historical fact than scientific fact then. And I voraciously read about the history of colonization. I don't know why. Maybe, the joke in my family is that I probably was, so, in a previous birth, I probably had an active role in the freedom struggle of some cultures, because I was fascinated by that. And the reason I say this is that the history of European colonial rule is that the greatness of African universities. And the Silk Route was entirely people from all these subcontinents, major cultures coming together who could speak each other's language. That was the purpose of the universities along the Silk Route. So that whole history of university was lost in colonial times. And I'm determined that actually is the reality of what were educational systems. So in those contexts, I do still see a lot of performative stuff everywhere, and we know why. But I think the key thing is just to remember the historical level at which it is. And we are, as Duneia said, George Floyd made a huge sacrifice in what happened to him, and so many others made huge sacrifices after what happened to him to start this movement. And we owe it to the system to continue that effort, right, to move it forward. And some of us are positioned with individuals in power who, for example, our dean started a task force for racial justice. And just the very name, the Task Force for Racial Justice of the Dean of the Medical School. How many schools will you see where that's actually the name of it? A diversity and inclusivity committee, right? Well, I don't know what committee means. It doesn't mean commitment, but a task force says, and he actually operated it that way. So the point is that I think there are places where around the world where this is happening. And what we have to do is to side with the things that aren't performative, and just to work against the things that are. And as you know, Melvin, on LinkedIn, we have a massive movement going that a core group of people have been involved in from the beginning when it wasn't popular, right? The point is that we found each other. And this is supposed to be global. This is what has happened. I feel that history has come to a point where this must be carried forward, and we're not going back. So I think that's the key thing. It's very hopeful. We have the ability to do it, and we have to put aside some little things like, as Duneia rightly said, a quarter, which she's already using for her research, but partially also committed to this. I'm much more happy and grateful that she did that, right? Than that she's focused on just her experimental work. And that's the point, because this is so much more historically important in what we're doing. So I think the key thing is that we have to keep feeding that. I think there's a lot of performative stuff, but we don't need to focus on it, because those of us who aren't performing aren't here to perform. So And there are people group, we're joining each other. We're allowed to join each other. And we're not asking permission to join each other. We're asking permission too. Because those people, that mentality isn't supposed to be in power anymore. And I think that is where we have stopped asking permission to do what is right. So that's the key thing. It was, for me, it wasn't just, I won't say just George Floyd. It isn't George Floyd's situation. And I know that you've had his relatives on your show, you know, you've helped me connect with some of them, and, you know, we're supporting them. But it's not about that. It's about what they want. They want this to be the last time we have to go through this, correct? And if it takes some more time to get us there, we've already committed to that. So that's not performative. It's not going to be performative.
No. Yeah, I think in the larger scale, yes, performance is what it is. I think because we were in that moment where everyone was home, we dared someone not to say something. So they acted in performance of solidarity statements and a black tile on Instagram. That's not going to do anything. Let's actually put forth the effort. And that's why I say I'm in a unique position where I'm actually at a place where I can see that it's not performative. But I can't say that for many of my other colleagues and friends who are at other universities, working at other companies. Yeah.
But I would say that it's actually in other parts of the world. This is global, okay? The BAME report, anyone who's following that, right? The Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic report that was done by the British government. Anyone who follows what's going on, it's blown up internationally that the British government tried to put a commission together, right? Another committee that basically did a report that they vetted themselves and said that the British institutional structure is not racist. And so it's exploded, and it's basically given more fuel to our effort. I'm very actively involved with that, with my Black colleagues there, and it's not gonna, this is not stopping. So, but they started speaking out because of George Floyd. So this is a global movement. And the last global movement I was involved in of this type was when a young man, well, not a young man, an older man who had been in a little, what do you call it, imprisoned in an island off the coast of South Africa that nobody knew about. We marched for him, you know? And when we met him, when he came out, Nelson Mandela influenced all of us. We're not, this is not one of those things. I can say with my finger on the pulse, this is not going to be performant. So people are either part of that solution or they're not. Mm-hmm. And at this point, no one's asking for the permission. So the boat is sailing. You're on the boat or you're not on the boat. That's it. And I don't think we should apologize for that, because this is way overdue.
Wow, that's great. You know, and I'm happy that you're sharing what you're sharing, because we are not apologizing. I'm a little perturbed because I promised Duneia she'd get to speak with Uncle Selwyn Jones, George Floyd's uncle. Agree with you. Well, both of you, but I'm just sharing, Dr. Pillai, is that I've been a freedom fighter all of my life. And I tell people that I've never apologized, and I will never start apologizing. And to me, it's real simple. We know how our world works when it comes to gender. So as a male, because I'm the physically bigger, stronger person, and then if I accost you as women and then have the audacity to blame you because I accosted you, how stupid is that? And that's the way I see racism, is that people do something to you and then want you to apologize to them for something they did to you. And it's just insane. So it behooves all of us to stand and to be counted. And it behooves all of us to stand and be counted as one, quite honestly, because what affects one affects the other. Dr. King has said that more than one time. Duneia mentioned her dad called her little Malcolm X. He has said that on more than one occasion. And you are saying that right now, Dr. Pillai, is that, if we don't stand together as human beings and do this whole humanitarian process, then we're going to continue. And that's why I wanted to ask both of you, as far as the medical profession, are they really serious about trying to rectify the situation? Because I know athletically they're not. As long as you're out there running around and getting your brains bashed out and that kind of thing, and they are making zillions of dollars, they're happy. But any kind of understanding of humanitarianism and the mistreatment of human beings, then all of a sudden you become a problem. So I just wanted to ask that, and that's why I said I didn't want to get you in trouble.
Right, I understand. No, but let me respond to that one thing though. I want to say this really quickly. So I'm following as many areas of human enterprise as I can to watch this, so that I'm trying to stay abreast for my own education and also to keep myself going.
Yes.
And one of the things, and I'm learning a lot, I'm a tremendous amount in that. One of the things I've noticed, and I'm not sure how accurate, you both can correct me if I'm wrong, but so LeBron, right? LeBron James has just purchased teams in the same way that multiple entertainers are purchasing so this is something really important. Racism is not about not valuing people alone. It was about commoditizing what they had out of greed to gain what they had free of charge. That's called stealing in normal English. And so to legitimize the entire enterprise of stealing from countries, they had to create a false concept called inferiority of a race. And so but the thing is, we're revisiting that in everything we're doing, because this is going at it economically, because you cannot ignore, therefore, that the solution to these problems is still taking back economic power. And that's influencing medicine very directly. So let me just get into that. People are doing a form, I've also connected with hundreds, not just tens, hundreds of really well-positioned people in finance, in venture capital, in equity, who come straight out of either African nations, Afro-Caribbean nations, backgrounds where they are representing, besides the optics of looking like the people they want to serve, more importantly, their entire history is intrinsically linked to this history of socioeconomic deprivation and racism. And so their impact investing is literally shifting billions of dollars away from these things very rapidly. That is what is needed to structurally influence this process. You remove the blood supply from this thing, and it will start dying off. And I honestly believe that's what we're seeing right now. We're going to see that this year, and medicine is influenced by that.
But I heard every word that you were sharing, and I hear you when you're sharing. You're not talking about hundreds. You're talking about literally thousands of people that are working through this process. But I do want to ask you if you have any parting statements you'd like to share with our audience.
I'd like one thing. I'd like, if you don't mind, Duneia, can you share your background before you got into research? Where you were born, you grew up, because I want the young people to hear about you more.
Yeah, so just a little bit about me. I'm from PG County, Maryland, and if you don't know where that is right outside of DC. So the DMV area. And if you know, or if you play or watch basketball, Kevin Durant is from that area.
It's called Prince George's County, right?
Yeah, that's who everybody knows. When I say Kevin Durant, they're like, oh, okay, he's from there. And, I think growing up in that place, PG County is one of the most, it's supposedly the largest affluent Black county in America. And because of that, I got a chance to grow up around people that looked like me, that were anything that they wanted to be. So my next door neighbor is an artist. Across the street from me is a guidance counselor, principal, there is everybody, anything that you want to be, we can connect you, you can see it, they're living it. And I'm playing on the playground with their kids. You understand what I'm saying? Like, so growing up in that space and always being allowed to just dream and being able to say, I want to be that when I grow up. And I was like, okay, let me point you in that direction. Let me tell you exactly what you need to do, and be given the resources to be able to say, what does that actually entail? And how can I get to that point is did a world of difference. So what I want to say with that is I want to be that for someone else. Be that, like, this is what a scientist looks like. She can look like you. She can listen to the same music that you do, and is hip to the same things on Twitter and TikTok and all that good stuff, but can still go into the lab and get her work done, and just be relatable. And I want to be that for the younger generation. And just, I always say, I might not get the Nobel Peace Prize, but I might spark the mind that does down the road. And more, like, even if I get someone to take an extra science class, I've done my job. I've done my purpose. If someone just needs a tutor, like, or it realizes, that this isn't it, but I'm still going to strive to do well in this class, I've done my job, because I'm just in a space where I just want people to just achieve at anything that they want to do, and know that they can do anything that they want to do as long as they put in the hard work to do it.
And I just want to, and again, there's a reason I'm asking this, so bear with me, I'll make it quick. I want you to describe your parents' background and where they came from, and to give you the opportunities you had. Because this is how we do this. We have to know the background and where we pay it forward. And how we
Absolutely.
Yeah, so both of my parents, my mom is from Brooklyn, New York. My dad is from Boston, and both were the first in their families to go to college. They both grew up, both of my parents grew up very poor, and are one of many children. And they just had it in their mind that they were going to be the first in their family to just make things better. And because of that, afforded me the opportunities, the life that I was able to live. Because of their hard work, I was able to work hard to get where I am today. And yeah, so both of them, coming from where they come from, coming from their background, and being totally just, like, college was not a suggestion for me. It was always something that I had to do it. And it was not in a sense like you won't be anything if you don't go to college. It was more of, this is what is going to be normal for you. I'm going to ensure,
right.
I'm going to ensure that you can go to college and that you can study anything that you want to study. But I understand that having that degree is going to make your life better.
And so when you decided on graduate school, what were the challenges you faced to get there, and what were your resources, and what did you find for yourself? Was that what your parents expected of you?
To go into graduate school? No.
Because that's the next level. It's a big jump.
No, but because of their, how can I say, just wanting me to be better.
Commitment to have,
or just that environment that I grew up in, of being a competitive employee for what it might be, right? I said, I want to be, for me personally, and just being a Black woman, understanding that I didn't want to be left out of conversations because I didn't have anything. So I said, what is it that I need that I can't get looked over or passed over for a job that I want? And a terminal degree is that. I would literally become an expert in that field. And you cannot say that I am not the right fit, because I am. There is no other degree higher than that.
You're qualified. Right. Yeah.
And because of that, I said, what's the next level? What can I do to ensure that I push things forward? And because of that, I first person in the family to go to graduate school. And
you found your scholarships, or they found you? Something happened to bring you the funding and to...
Oh, well, yeah. So I did a lot of Google searches, and that's when I was able to find the post back at the NIH where I was at Virginia Tech, where that was fully funded. And
I want people to hear that, because that's really important. Those are the real concrete things.
Yeah. So the biggest thing with that,
Yes.
there's money out there for you. One of the things that I'll never forget this. My undergrad bio 105 teacher, Anne Simon, if you can look her up, she's great. She also lives in that space between STEM and art, because she was the science advisor for the X-Files. So if you've ever watched X-Files, and the reasons why some of those things are realistic is because she sat at the table at the writer's room and said, no, don't say this, say this, because that's an actual scientific term.
That was well written, and they weren't having blue water in little tubes that didn't look...
Yeah, exactly. So she said to me, there aren't many people that look like you in my field, and do you understand they will pay you and cover your tuition to get the degree that I have? And I was like, for real? They just giving money to everybody like that? They're like, it's fully funded. There are so many opportunities for you to get what you need to get to the next step, where you won't have to put any money in. All you have to do is just show that you are worthy, in the sense that, get the good grades, do well in your interview, and then just do well in those type of programs. And there's so many resources out there that can get you to the next levels. And because I went to that NIH program, where I was afforded the opportunity to go to a certain conference that was particularly for Black students so that they can get into graduate school, I was able to talk to graduate advisors. And from there, I was able to get application fees waived. I was able to talk about tidbits that can make my application more competitive over, the typical applicant pool. And the only thing that I had to pay, I had GRE completely paid for and tutoring paid for as well through this NIH funded opportunity. I took graduate school level courses to give myself an edge up and over the typical applicant, to just show them that I was prepared for school and that I could balance all of these things. And all that I had to pay for, it was a lot of money, because graduate schools are, the application is expensive, but all I had to pay for was to send out my transcripts to schools. Other than that, the GRE was paid for, sending that out was paid for, and then I got application waivers, and I applied to over 10 schools and had to pay $20 for my transcripts to get sent to those. So.
Wow.
So one thing we're going to do, Duneia, I've started a conversation a while back, but we haven't yet addressed that, about what we want to do to try to, work together on some of the things we can while she's in our program, also to improve impact. One thing we're going to do is our lab website. Duneia, we're going to make sure that, I just thought about this while you were talking, we need to put a link there that will open up to a website where you can create a space there of opportunities.
Yeah.
Because people are going to want to know about that after seeing this. So
yes, they are.
We'll do that. Viewers can come there in another month. We'll make sure that they're there. So you can at least know what opportunities Duneia had, and she can keep adding to that as she's working in other areas in school already. So I think that could be really useful. Let them come to that site, and then we can have a link there that they can come in. Find the...
Nice to meet you. So my name's Duneia. I'm a graduate student in Dr. Pillai's lab, and I just had the pleasure of talking to Mr. Lars about my background and why I'm interested in science and what I want to do with it, with our community in particular. And I'm just honored to meet you. And I just want to say sorry for your loss, and that you are not alone in this, and that we're out here riding for you for sure.
Yeah, you sound
In all
like
in all facets.
you sound like a lady, but you look like you're like 12 years old. So I need to see your ID.
She's precocious. I'll say that. But
Dear,
she was just talking about how the events of the summer really influenced her, and as already being an activist. But you know, I think it's so wonderful that she's getting to meet.
let me tell you something, dear. It does my heart exceptionally well, because I'm the baby out of 14 kids. I got 12 sisters, and it does my heart well to see young, beautiful Nubian princesses trying to make that change, because we need queens and kings, you know. So you know, we need lawyers, we need doctors, we need everybody that's in a position of power to make change. Because yeah, God bless you, dear. God bless you. That's what I like to say. Young lady, question. What made you want to do what you are doing?
I don't know. So like, I'm just naturally, I just had a lot of questions for anything. I'd like to ask why, why things were the way they were. How do we make it better? And I think for me personally, I took a class in, science can answer those questions, like why things happen, right? And I took a class when I was in undergrad, and it was immunology. And the way he like prefaced the class, he said, you know what, like this has to deal with your body. So I'm going to talk about something that can naturally happen to you, and we'll go through it. So the way he talked about it was, we're gonna say you stepped on a nail, and let's talk about the immune reaction that happens from you just stepping on that nail, and why you would need a shot after that, and why is it turning red, and why is it inflamed, and what does inflammation actually mean. So like, I was getting all of the information of like, okay, so that's why we take an ibuprofen, and that's why you get a tetanus shot if you step on a rusty nail. So it was able to answer those questions. And I'm like, okay, you can answer questions and help people. Why not?
Let me tell you this. I obviously respect your profession after yesterday. And yesterday was actually, it was a day that I haven't had, because if you notice, you see him urinate between the time that it runs down the street. Well, I knew that's when he faded off and went to heaven or hell, wherever he went. But when I was listening at that scientist yesterday talking, he said, what we saw was a tremor. And what happens when your brain doesn't receive enough oxygen, and when it shuts down, your eyes flutter. And dear, I watched that, and that's the moment that my nephew lost his life. And dear, you know, like I said, you do whatever you need to do to help our people, to obviously help yourself, because a lot of people did not have the opportunities as you got. So, you know, there's a lot of people that sort of kind of broke the door in so we can have some little princess rocket scientists like you. And that old dude, Mr. Lars, he's been doing this since the 60s.
Well, we're honored to be on this with him, you know, absolutely. Yeah.
Brother Lars he's been in it to win it since the 60s. And, you know, I'm a late bloomer, you know. Just by chance, we had a young man in Minneapolis that wanted to use power and control. And that's what all white folks have used over the years. Back in the old days, if they couldn't handle you, obviously they'd kill you. Then they resorted to putting you in jail, because if you don't agree with them, that means that you're not good with them. And, you know, just a little bitty dib. I live in a town of 1,200 people, dear. Wow. And yeah, I was JQ Man of the Year. And in that article, it talks about how there's a Confederate flag out here in this town. We had a Klan rally. They bought a flag and put it in the lady's car in my parking lot. And people were posting, you know, asking, hey, did you take a picture of the flag in the Ends parking lot. And yeah, I got numerous people that have thumbs up or liked it. So what I'm telling you, Doc, is I didn't have a choice to start going this situation because I've seen too many black folks get hurt by white folks. I've seen the power measures they use, especially when you grew up in the deep South.
Yeah.
I get sickening every time I see a brother get hurt by a police officer, get shot in the back. Think about this, Doc. Who in the world would chase somebody down with a white dude standing in the back of a truck, another white dude following him, then the other white guy, which was trying to help him but wasn't trying to help him, cut him off, and he videotaped all of this, and then he gave it to the police. You know what they said after that? Your ass is under arrest. Now, how did it become in this world that those folks think they could ride around and in 2020 and chase black people in the back of their truck? Because if I look back and I see a white dude in the back of a truck with a gun, that's a bad day. And it just keeps on. It ain't slowed down.
Yeah.
We get a black dude killed every week, by police violence. But that isn't what this thing is about. Police violence is just a little bit, Doc. You know that. I want a lot of our kids to be like socialists there and can say they're going to be a doctor, but a lot of people don't have that right because they want to keep you dumb and unintelligent. So you can't go to good school. So you can't get a good job. So you can't be a world changer. Mm-hmm. And I love my Nubian princesses. That's all I got to tell you, Doc. Absolutely. You tell your honey that.
No, I want them to have their power too. I want them to have their power. Power, right?
Young ladies, you got to fight a little bit harder because you have, unfortunately, that Caucasian man taught a lot of black guys how to disrespect people and disrespect themselves. Therefore, Melvin's got me being a real numbers person. 67% of the people that have babies don't have daddies. Think about that, Doc. How are we ever going to catch up to speed when we got a lot of young men that are still pitying themselves, that are still angry at themselves, and they can't get resolved? Because, hey, we're here because of my nephew, George. He couldn't get resolved with his demons. So I reckon, the Lord just said, hey, man, you know what? You ain't doing the best things in life right now. Actually, all you're doing is destroying yourself piece by piece. And I honestly feel this way, he used George as a sacrificial lamb. So Darnella Frazier had to be there. Chauvin had to be there. And George had to be there. And I reckon when you add all that up, it sort of kind of comes at me because my nephew knows without a shadow of a doubt that Uncle Selwyn was going to have his back. And that's crazy because I can't say that I believe somebody would have my back because, Doc, for 54 years, we grew up poor. So you didn't get a lot of respect from anybody. No running water in the house, pump. And you sort of kind of had to find respect, and obviously come most of it with football as I got bigger. Mm-hmm. And you just seen people so hateful, so angry, because somebody told them when they died that our brains is a little bit bigger than monkeys, and the only thing we can do is be subservient with the right measures taken. That means to whip you. Who in the world would consciously set out for every day of their life hating somebody because of the color of their skin? Think about that. 55 years ago, dear, we couldn't even go in the front of the restaurant, but we could go get shot in Vietnam. Right. How does all this stuff happen?
You're welcome to lay your life down for the country, but they're not going to stand up for you. So
they're not going to give you a flag.
When you come down to Miami, another person, and Duneia hopefully by then will be really well tied in with this person. There's a remarkable person here whom I've connected with. His name is Dr. Marcus Bright. I'm putting it here just because people may want to go look at him on LinkedIn and such. He has a thing called the 5,000 Stars Project, and he's basically—
You say Marcus Bright?
Marcus Bright. He's been all over the country now, but he started in Miami-Dade. I won't call it a support program. It's a program of excellence for young Black men. And these 5,000 kids, young men, are amazing. They've graduated that class. Now they're the next group of mentors to another 5,000. This is a serious thing. And I want you to meet him and see what he's doing. His mother was an educator. She recently passed away, but he did this as a legacy for her. And it's remarkable. We're going to connect with them. And one of the things that I want us to do is anything he'd like us to do, because he knows what he's doing. But, if we can be a place where young Black men who want to be in science, can get a model like Duneia and have a big sister there and all that, that's what we're going to do, So we just need to do this. We need to keep this going. And so.
Doc, I tell you what, Doc, let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. I'm going to look this gentleman up, but at the same time, whatever connections you have. And
Sure.
I would like to for us to do a show with them and for us to make a connection.
That's a great idea. I'll connect you on LinkedIn right now.
Okay. Is that we have had the ladies on an extended amount of time, and I don't want to be rude, and I just wanted them to have an opportunity to get to chat with you briefly. Ms. Duneia was expressing her thoughts and her respect, and I just thought, with all of the pressure that you've been under, that it would be great to hear that coming from somebody else. And also, I wanted you to know publicly that there's nothing that's going to stop you and I from going forward, and you know what I'm talking about, and I'll leave it there.
You have all of our support. Anything we can do, you let us know.
This young fella
Absolutely.
gets what a criminal gets. And that's all I'm asking for. I don't want the judicial system to do anything different for us. I just want them not to harm us and kill us and shoot us and scare us and intimidate us, because they got that power and control, Doc.